Hello and welcome to another virtual class presentation under the Diploma of Leadership and Management. I'm your trainer, Lucia, and I would like to present today a topic that is part of Cluster 1 under self-management, and it's really about communicating with influence. Hopefully, at the end of this video, you would have learned many techniques and tips that would help you negotiate effectively. As a leader and manager, we negotiate every day. It doesn't have to be a complex contract or something that is, involving too many people. It could be a very simple negotiation, such as negotiating on lunch breaks, who's going to take 12, who's going to take the one, so on and so forth. So I believe that being able to watch this video will help you get to negotiate effectively, and it doesn't matter the scale of the project or the task that you would like to negotiate on. So in the previous videos, I actually covered the basics of communication, and I also covered the topic called SCARF model. Now, the SCARF model is a technique used to be able to discover what actually drives or motivates a person to make certain decisions. So I encourage you to watch those videos as well. And this is really created for you to be able to complete the assessment under Cluster 1. You are expected to complete a negotiation meeting. So here it is. Let's move on. Now, certain how-tos on ways of improving your persuasion and negotiation skills. First, we all know that having good emotional intelligence absolutely is key to be able to negotiate, being able to understand yourself more, how to regulate your emotions, and as well as having that good social awareness. You understand people's perspectives more, and you're able to manage that relationship with them in using your communication or, body language and even verbal communication, and as well as how you perceive them as well. It's very important that as a leader and manager, you have the ability to look at things in an objective manner and understand the technicality of how complex people can be, and how diverse we all are. So emotional intelligence is absolutely important. The second one is constantly work on your communication skills. This is not just about knowing what to say, but also knowing how to say it. And most importantly, body language is something that is so important. Now, when we are negotiating with someone, I would then say, depending on, of course, how well you know the other person, how much you've worked together, how long you've been working together, the type of relationship you have with the other party, or how complex the negotiation topic is or the project is. Stress levels will always going to be a bit higher than normal, because you are there and you know that you'll be asked to make a decision at the end of the day. And you will be expecting that things may not go your way, so the stress levels and what you call the fight, flight, and freeze mode would be a bit triggered, and it will escalate depending on how your meeting goes. So when a person is actually in that type of mindset, we're very quick at picking up body language. Our brains know that body language really gives you a more genuine idea of how the person is feeling about certain topics. It actually is 55% of 55% of communication that and the deliverer of communication to us. So to be able to know what sort of body language you would need to adapt or to use is also a very good thing to be able to do. Now, the SCARF model I've mentioned, I do have a video for that, so so please do watch it. The next one that we're going to handle now is to really understand the principles of effective negotiations. All right, so the first bit is preparing. Okay, so prepare really well. Now, what does preparation mean and what does it look like? There's quite a lot involved in it, and I will talk about it in the next few slides. I'll just quickly go through the principles and then get into the preparation stage deeply, so you're able to get that guide, okay, on how best to prepare for a negotiation meeting. Bear in mind that the key points that I'll be sharing with you can also be found in your assessment workbook and your learner resource. Okay, so also already expect that there are going to be diverse positions, perception, and possibly the values, not possibly, but yes, diverse values in certain discussions. And you need to be able to expect that adaptability and flexibility is quite important. Okay, so it's not about just what you prefer, but being able to adjust your communication style, adjust your approach depending on the person you're dealing with. Okay. The third tip is to make early agreements on the process of negotiation. When we say early agreements, I'll give you an example. We then go, okay, I would want both of us to be able to negotiate on wages, for example. And I would then say, okay, so how are we going to do this? Okay, on the policy and procedure, this is what we're meant to do. I'm meant to speak to the HR and, if you could research on your own, why don't we meet up and discuss about, what your preference is, what your request is, and I'll tell you all about what I can do as your manager. So I think what we're going to have to do is to set up a meeting. So this is now making early agreement. Set up a meeting first, talk about it, and then, if we need to go back to a second meeting, we'll do that again, right? And then finally, I will provide HR with all the documentation and everything we've discussed and wait for approval. So I've just let the person know what the process is, okay, before, during, and when a decision is about to come out. So the person knows what to expect. Being able to lay that out at the beginning definitely lays the standard of expectation. So there's no miscommunication or, conflict, okay, even before and during the negotiation and even after, so these are having those early agreements. And if you're not really certain, then you have to be honest with the other party and say, this is what I think, but let me get back to you and see if this is really the process. So always remember that the negotiation meeting is just the next step, but the first step is letting the other party know what the process of negotiation would look like, okay, so they know what to expect. Now, when you know what you're trying to negotiate, you'll start filling your head with things you need to have and things that you need to do. And of course, the people that would be needed to support you, who's involved, all the stakeholders, just start listing them down and how you would communicate to them, and how what is the interest and the influence of each person into that negotiation, right? Because there might be a tendency that you would, have this negotiation in a bubble with just that other party, and forget that there are other stakeholders involved, and end up, losing credibility, because then you've agreed on to something, but then you've forgotten that there is still quite a lot of people who may impact that final agreement. So it's so important that you list down people who may be affected or who will affect the outcome of that negotiation meeting. And then we've got the respect and honesty. Now, what does respect look like to you? Think about it. Respect is about, using, words that are professional and not offensive. But there's more to it, and we're talking about the the standards of each person and expectation of each person, what respect actually looks like. In some cultures, respect could mean being quiet and not interrupting. But it wouldn't really mean that much for other cultures. Other cultures are really very boisterous and they talk and they don't mind being interrupted. Some of them, because it's just the normal way of communicating. But in other cultures, it is very disrespectful. So the standards are different. How do you know what the other party standards are? Now, that's a very good question. When you negotiate with someone, you will then know that the more you know the other person, the more effective you'll be in negotiating. So if you don't have the time, to know more about that person, do a bit of research as well. Ask other people discreetly about the preference of the other party. What's the cultural background of that party, of the other party, and things like that. Just basic things that will help you understand what the standards may be. And some people would definitely say, okay, straightforward, what are you expecting out of this? And tell me a little bit about yourself and all that. That's the reason why casual meetings before a formal negotiation meeting is preferred to be set up, because it allows two parties to be in that comfortable level, being able to discuss things in that meeting. So yes, and honesty definitely. However, when we're doing all this, just bear in mind that you are representing the organization, and the organization ultimately tells you and expects of you that you follow the code of conduct, as well as all the other policies and procedures like privacy and confidentiality. Think of those things, and there's work health and safety. There's, in terms of communications, there's communication policy, So all these things you have to consider, because at the end of the day, you do represent the business. Right, so act with integrity, that's absolutely important. And what does integrity look like? It's about ethics. It's about, following your legal obligations and responsibilities to your business, to other people. So know what your legal obligations are. It's very, very important to know that. Any negotiations, I think if it comes to, agreements in a business environment, you have to know at a minimum what you are expected to follow legally. Okay, so that's important. Also, part of emotional intelligence is being able to be mindful of how you behave in front of the person. When we talk about emotional management, we talk about being able to manage your thoughts and then being able to manage your emotions, because you manage your thoughts, and being able to manage your behavior, because you've taken the 3 steps of managing yourself, right? So manage your emotions carefully. Be very sensitive and respond to emotional cues. And when we say emotional cues, when you say something, have a look at that person, okay? And be sensitive to signs of how they have accepted or received that message. Did they understand it? Did they show a negative reaction to what you've just said? So be sensitive. So because if you're not, then you'll miss out on the opportunity to be able to address these. Because at the end of the day, your goal is to have the best outcome out of this negotiation. We also have what we call the right level of flexibility. How do you know how flexible you can be? It all really lies on legislation, on organizational standards and requirements, your basic human rights, all right, and your authority as well, to be able to offer other options. Okay, so those are things you need to remember. Make realistic commitments. Do not overpromise and underdeliver. And at the end of the entire meeting, make sure that there has to be a summary of, you know, to confirm that what you thought just happened in the meeting and what you've agreed on is also the same thing that person has in mind. It's extremely important to summarize because, you know, conversations can go off a tangent and you might have received the message in a different way, or you may have been distracted or whatever, and be the other party as well. So it's very important to say, okay, so at the end of this is what we've agreed on, and this is how it's going to look like. Okay, so make sure you've got that summarized. And in all cases, okay, for me, if it's really possible, follow it up with a written agreement, because that seals everything, you know, and it's done black and white. Now, I talked about the general principles of effective negotiations, and a major part of being able to do this is the amount of preparation that you do. So how you plan and prepare for things before the meeting happens. So let's have a look at certain things that you can do prior. So preparation means, you know, developing an agenda. There's so many benefits in doing that. Instead of just keeping it in your head, write it down. Okay, especially when it's an official, it's a meeting of official business. There has to be an agenda. Why is an agenda important? So you can communicate that to the other party and say, okay, these are the timelines, and within that time frame, this is what we need to discuss and we need covered. And you're able to manage the meeting very well. You know, both of you are on the same page. You don't go off a tangent. You get what you expect to get at the end of the meeting. Okay, and you're giving that person courtesy to know what to expect. So you're communicating that person already, and then gives them the opportunity to prepare for that meeting really well. So whatever decisions they'll make are decisions that they're confident they're making because they know they've done their own preparation as well. The list of documents that you will be required to refer to, and you know, including what the other party might request of you, would be important as well, to start collating that and making sure it's accessible to you during the meeting. Explain why the activity is key to the business. Now, a lot of managers are just on that do mode. Let's get this done, get this done, get this done. Without taking the time to step back and think, okay, what is this for really? You know, what is the goal? Okay, what is the objective, and how does this align to the organization? What's the benefit to us? When you kind of step back and think about it, you then have a better idea of the sense of urgency and your boundaries, you know, for that particular topic. So you won't underestimate it, or you also don't overestimate, you know, and do too much and make it too complex. So get into that, the goal, the ultimate goal. Why and what do we need to achieve? Now, I've mentioned the stakeholders are important, okay, both internal and external, whoever impacts and who's going to be interested with the outcome of the negotiations. Explain what your position is and what you intend to achieve out of discussion and negotiation activity. Now, prior, I said, okay, how does this align to the organization? This one is different. This is about you, your role. Okay, so what is your position? How much authority do you have? How much influence do you have? And how much interest do you have on that particular negotiation topic? And what would you want to achieve out of it? Okay, so that would be another one. Now, you now know what you want to achieve out of it. You then start listing down, okay, how you will support or how you will communicate that to the other person. What will you say to the other person? Why the outcome you want to get out of this negotiation, it's extremely important. Okay. Now, when you're putting an explanation, it is important to think about two sides, your side and the other person's side, because you need to support your argument. You need to be able to put facts into it, the benefits for yourself and other parties involved, and especially the party in front of you. So we need to, build that credibility, put as many resources as you need, charts, graphs, feedback, testimony, whatever it is. How will you support your argument? This is building credibility. How you obtain the authority to negotiate on the issue you've identified. So really, it's telling the other party is that I make the final decision, okay, because I have the authority to make this decision for you. Or it could be the other end. It says, I will be conveying this agreement to a higher to a party with a higher level of authority. So it is important that you understand what your boundaries and your limits are, and the other person knows your level of authority as well. And when you talk about negotiations, it can't be a negotiation if the party is just accommodating and not saying anything against what you want to achieve. So it's important that you try to think of possible things other people may say or may request, or even just emotional cues. What if you find somebody who's rolling their eyes during the meeting? What will you do about it? So how will you manage tactics? What are you going to say? So put examples in your head, write them down, write how you're going to respond to them. So that's a very good way of being very prepared. The more you think about these things, although it does get you nervous while you're thinking of how to respond to this, but once you have looked into all different possibilities and tactics, and you can see on paper that you actually have a response to it, then you will feel more calm and more confident as you get into your negotiation meeting. And lists of ideas on how you can countermeasure their arguments. So, so that's part and parcel of that. So description of different tactics, so emotional cues, what they're going to say, and then how you're going to respond is how you countermeasure their arguments. An outline of emotional triggers that are likely to occur during the negotiation. Okay, meetings and presentations, and consider the strategies you can employ to deal with this. So it's really similar to the higher point up, which is a description of different tactics, okay, but it's not actually outlining the words of emotions. So we're talking about emotional triggers. So if say, for example, I said this, that's an emotional trigger, the other person may feel offended. Okay, so you start building emotional words on that preparation document, because the moment you have an emotion in front of you, then you're able to consider the appropriate strategies to de-escalate those emotions. Okay, so if I said this person will feel upset, how will I make her feel more secure and comfortable? Is this. Okay, so that's how we try to use, or that's how we apply emotional intelligence, is using these emotional words, putting them down and responding to these, because sometimes people may say words, but it doesn't actually represent entirely how they feel about things. And when you respond to it, you may have an error of response. Whereas if you look at an emotion, okay, if you have that feeling, how will you then appease or countermeasure that emotion to make them feel more comfortable or more secure and building trust with that other person. And so that's a double up. But next would be the emotional weakness and strengths of other people. So if you know them, you may know that some people get really easily anxious, and the strengths would be they're very responsive. You start, writing them down. And the reason behind that is that then you would know, kind of a better idea of what to avoid any conflict that might happen. So, consider what those emotional weakness and strengths are of the other party. And of course, other cultural expressions that may occur. Some people may be more quiet because it's part of their culture. So think of strategies on how to let that person open up more, or maybe, instead of having just one meeting, extend it to another meeting until that person is able to give you all that's in their head, so you get the full message. And remember that before having a negotiation meeting, make sure that you identify your own personal stressors. It's not just about them, it's about you as well. Because remember, you need to be able to manage your emotions really well, okay, when you're going through this. So think about personal stressors. And it's common knowledge that if a person disagrees with you, that's going to be a personal stressor. So you're going to have that that response of being upset. So how are you going to manage that? So think of strategies. During the meeting, just very quickly, these are just very basic things. We know respect for values, concerns, and views of other parties is important. It's about how you say things and how you manage the meeting. It's about making sure that you listen to them, okay? And be very respectful on how you respond to diverse views of things, and always have that line of communication open, and it written or verbal. Acknowledge the differences of opinion. Acknowledge, we mean, yes, thank you very much for letting me know that's how you see things. It's not just about just straight away responding to it, but sometimes being able to take that time to just acknowledge and say that additional sentence allows you that time to think as well on how you're going to respond after. So you don't respond impulsively as well. And encourage debate. Like, if you kind of just want the person to be quiet, there's a high possibility that the person may make a decision, but they're not themselves bought into it, and there might be a change later on. So it's important that being able to delve deeply into certain issues that may occur, encourage that person to open up more, and any objection that might come through in their heads and that might change your minds, you'll be able to tackle them right there and then, as much as possible. And of course, a variety of communication styles to present business case. And what I'm saying business styles would be, think of being able to visually represent what you're trying to say, not just words. Be very, how do you call this, innovative in how you present and manage the meeting and deliver your message, as well as, some people may prefer different ways of communicating. Some people may want, quick, precise, concise, and some people may want a little bit of fluff, a little bit of talking, chit chat. So know what the styles are of the people that you're dealing with and try to adjust that, because then they will know that you're building that rapport and you're speaking their language as well. Now, think of mutually beneficial solutions for a final resolution. When you get into a negotiation meeting, always think of three things: worst case scenario, best case scenario, and the middle ground. Think of you, think of the other party as well, and see how they meet. Okay, so importantly, black, white, and gray. Okay, so this is worst outcome. I'll never get to that outcome. That is absolutely my limit. This is absolutely a heaven. This is my 1-2, but this is how I can probably meet halfway. And that takes you to the next point, which is potential compromise, and keep negotiations focused on key issues. This is where the agenda becomes a huge tool for this, because you go, okay, we're running out of time. We still need to discuss a few other things. Can we just go ahead and let's park that for another meeting? Learn how to manage those things so you're able to keep on track. You've got privacy, confidentiality, okay? Lay that out with the other party. Language appropriate for your audience, avoid jargons, things that may not be understood by the other party easily. Now, active listening is not just about nodding, it's about writing down, it's about summarizing what they've said or asking more questions, and it's letting that person know, yes, I've listened to you, I heard you, I've listened, and I understood what you just said. and seek immediate feedback. So ask for feedback, and it's not just waiting until the end of the meeting. Ask at the start, how are you feeling? Okay, do you want some time? Do you want a break? Am I getting across well to you? Do I need to explain further? Do I need to use a more simpler way of presenting things out to you? So seek feedback frequently. Respond to emotional triggers of participants. We know that already. Okay. Remain flexible. Take into account the emotions of other parties and maintain credibility throughout the process. All right. So as a summary, just the past few minutes, you've learned what preparation means before a negotiation meeting happens. You know that you need to be inclusive with diversity, okay? Everybody thinks differently. We all come from different backgrounds. So that is type of respect that is needed to consider all different views and expect and provide different options that are appropriate, okay, to the diversity of people that's involved in the topic. Make early agreements, okay, on the process, and anticipate your needs for resources and even the needs of the other party, okay, and negotiate with respect and honesty. So those 5, okay, plus going back to the 6 others, the integrity and legislation, managing your emotions, sensitivity to emotional cues, be flexible, and make realistic commitments, and make sure that you actually meet and action those agreements, because that's credibility and trust as well, and maintaining relationships. And always summarize at the end of the meeting. So I hope that you have learned a few things on negotiations. And if you feel that you need to have more sessions with me, we can go through samples later on if you are in a position of being able to negotiate, in the next couple of days or weeks, or you're anticipating to get into a negotiation meeting. I would invite you to call me or email or message me, and we could run through the different stages, like the preparation stage and being able to anticipate tactics and having a plan, so you could effectively negotiate. I thank you very much for joining me today, and the next week we're going to talk about presentations. How can you present to different people in different ways and methods? And that's still part of communicating with influence. So if you have stage fright, if you have worries about being able to present to a large crowd, that virtual class presentation would definitely be worth attending or watching. Thank you, and till the next time.